connaissance de l'art à découvrir.
Good afternoon one more time from Geneva. We are still waiting for our speakers to come to the room, so hopefully we will start shortly. Thank you. Hello again from Geneva, and apologies for the delay. We have our guest today, Dr. Mike Ryan, Executive Director of WHO Health Emergencies Program, and for the first time on the panel we have Dr. Oliver Morgan, Director of Health Emergency Information and Risk Assessment here at WHO. As always, we will have an audio file immediately available after the briefing, and transcript will be available tomorrow in the morning. We will keep this press briefing short, so I will remind again journalists to ask only one question so we can get as many as possible. For journalists online, please click raise hand to be put in a queue for questions, and those who are dialing in, press *9, and then we will try to get your question. I'll give the floor immediately to Dr. Mike Ryan.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and apologies for being late. And apologies to Dr. Tedros. He's just about to, I think, land in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where he's following up on important Ebola matters and meeting with President Tshisekedi and many others to look at the future post-Ebola of the health system in Congo. I'm sure you'll understand how important a task and a mission that is, given the last year and a half in Congo. Ongoing struggles in that country to deliver effective health care and reduce suffering and mortality from infectious diseases. Let me start by updating you on the latest numbers. In the last 24 hours, China has reported 1,820 laboratory confirmed cases, bringing the total cases to 4,550. In addition, China reported 13,332 clinically confirmed cases in Hubei province. And crucially, we understand that most of these cases relate to a period going back over days and weeks and are retrospectively reported as cases since sometimes back to the beginning of the outbreak itself. This increase that you've all seen in the last 24 hours is largely in part down to a change in how cases are being diagnosed and reported. So, in other words, in Hubei province only, a trained medical professional can now classify a suspected case of COVID-19 as a clinically confirmed case imaging rather than having to have a laboratory confirmation. This allows clinicians to move and report cases more quickly, not having to wait for lab to clinical care more quickly, and allows public health responses in terms of contact tracing and other important public health measures to be initiated. As you've noticed with suspect cases, there have been some backlogs in testing, and this is also going to help in ensuring that people get adequate care and that adequate public health measures can be taken. So we're not dealing, from what we understand, a spike in cases of 14,000 on one day. To an extent, this is an artifact of the reporting, and we are working with our colleagues in China. Our team there are working very to see exactly how many days and weeks and how those numbers are spread out across those days and weeks. In the rest of China and the rest of the world, laboratory confirmation for reporting is still required, and WHO will continue to track both laboratory and clinically confirmed cases in Hubei province. As we've seen this spike in the number of cases reported in China, but this does not represent a significant change in the trajectory of the outbreak. Outside China, there are 447 cases from 24 other countries, and now 2 deaths. In addition to the death in the Philippines, there is now 1 more death in Japan. We have said consistently that we need to be cautious when drawing conclusions from daily reported numbers. I think we were having that discussion yesterday, and I think the numbers today speak to that. We need to be very careful when interpreting any extremes, be it in incubation periods, be it in daily numbers. We must take all numbers into account. We must look at all numbers seriously, but we also must try and interpret what those numbers mean and not react directly itself. The number of countries reporting changed, and outside the cases on the Diamond Princess cruise ship, we're not seeing a dramatic increase in transmission outside China. And that is the current picture. We're still saying to governments around the world that we still have an opportunity to prepare for the potential spread of the virus. Regarding the Diamond Princess cruise ship, which is currently quarantined in Yokohama, 218 passengers have tested positive for the virus, which does represent the largest cluster of COVID-19 cases outside China. This morning I briefed health ministers from the European Union, convened by Croatia, the presidency, about COVID-19, and our teams are working with government and other partners of the European Union to ensure that the latest information is disseminated, that preparations are made, and there's good coordination between ourselves and the European Union and our WHO Regional Office for Europe, and we very much welcome from the European Union in supporting countries with weaker health systems and ensuring that other countries have the investments and support needed to prepare for the arrival of the virus. In terms of the international mission, the advanced team and their Chinese counterparts have now finalised the scope of work and design of the mission, and we expect the rest of the international team to start arriving in China over the weekend. Thank you. Back to you, Tariq.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ryan. Just to repeat again, for journalists dialing in, it's *9. For those online, click raise hand. And now we will open floor for questions. One question per person, please. Okay, I go first to Mark. Mark, please.
Yeah, Mark, please. Yeah, Mark, when you can.
Can you just press the button, please?
Yeah, could I ask you first, given the spike in the number of fatalities, is there any sign that the profile of those who are dying is in any way changing? Is it predominantly still the elderly and those with underlying health conditions, or are you seeing any signs that the young are being hit?
No, we're not seeing a significant shift in the pattern of mortality or severity for that matter. This disease is still pretty severe in those who are over 40, with a higher severity profile that increases actually with each decade after that, and predominantly too that severity is amongst men than women, and we haven't seen a significant shift. That profile is very much repeated in other areas outside Hubei, certainly in other provinces and administrative regions. Hong Kong has a very similar pattern of severity and age. Singapore has a very similar pattern, around the world. So Oliver may wish to add. He's more in tune with the daily data.
No, as Dr. Ryan said, we haven't seen any major changes yet. We're still obviously following up that closely. As we have a larger number of deaths, we might see a few more deaths in the younger age groups, but it's still predominantly in the older age groups, older 80 years old.
Yes, please, and sorry for yesterday.
Thank you. Yang with Xinhua News Agency. There were 9 thematic areas at yesterday's forum. So which are the most pressing ones, and which research institutions are now doing what jobs exactly in this regard?
We could have a whole press conference on that one. I think the thematic areas obviously range across. You've seen the group really tried to focus in on what were the most urgent things, and in truly listening first of all and foremost to our frontline colleagues in China. What do you need most? What do you need in the front line? And frontline clinicians, frontline public health workers. And that are coming from them is better diagnostics that can be used in the front line in emergency decisions. And certainly that's an immediate need. There's the clinical trials that are currently started in China to use similar trial protocols in other countries like Japan, like in Singapore. The drugs that are being tried and tested, we've got some standard antivirals that have been used in the past in MERS and SARS that are being tried. We've also got some anti-HIV drugs that are being used and tried. So the quicker we find out whether those drugs are having an impact. And that could be as are set up. We could have good information in weeks. And accelerating, expanding and standardizing those trials across many sites will give us a larger number of observations and a much stronger indication as to whether those drugs are working. You can imagine being a frontline clinician at the moment, knowing which drug works would be a magical gift at this point, not only for families but for those doctors and nurses treating them. So that's what they're saying to us. Tell us what's working, give us better diagnostics in the front line. We on the public health side, I've said this before, we really need to understand to what extent, and Director General Tedros has said this many times, how big is the iceberg? We do know and we all accept that there is transmission occurring at some level in communities. We've seen those clusters, we've seen those super spreading events. The question mark is how much is happening outside what we see. The ability to do household and community studies, to develop a serology test that will allow us to test populations to determine how many people in a population have been infected over time. That will allow us to have a much epidemic would eventually get. So we need serology testing in order to do that as well. So better population-based testing through serology, better point-of-care diagnostics to allow clinicians to make better choices, better data on what's working in therapeutics. Obviously, work on identifying the animal source. While identifying the source is not necessarily going to improve how we deal with this event per se, but if there is a source out there in the animal kingdom, we better identify it, because if we end this epidemic with all of the hard work, we don't want to be exposed to another one with the same virus. So understanding where the source is has become very important. It's operationally very important, and for it's very important. And then there are the bigger questions that need to be answered, vaccines and new drugs, and they're going to take a lot longer to come on stream, but it doesn't mean we can wait. We have to make big decisions now around the best candidate vaccines, and they're going to require huge investments. You make a decision to advance a vaccine to phase 1, phase 2, phase trials requires hundreds of millions of dollars to be invested, and we may have to invest in multiple candidates that one of them will work. And they're big decisions, and they're not just made by the private sector, who's going to have to get involved to stimulate and take some of the risk with the private sector to advance those potential candidates. So there are big policy decisions to come, and they need to be made early in order to drive the innovation. So there is an urgency. We'll go on with the list, and we also need, and it may not seem like research in the scientific sense, but we also need to have better understanding on how communities are responding to this virus. What's working? What's scaring of misinformation? We need a vaccine against misinformation as well. And in that sense, we need a community vaccine. We need to be able to communicate in a much more effective way. And there are lots of ideas within the plan for how we can advance social science and other research. And that's just as important as well. So I hope I haven't done some justice to this huge that needs to be carried out. But it was an exciting meeting. There's a huge commitment on behalf of Globals to work together with our Chinese colleagues. And now we know what to do to get on and do it.
Thank you very much. Let's take one more question from the room, then we will to journalists online. NBC, please.
Press the mic button. Okay, go ahead, please. Richard Engel from NBC. You mentioned the iceberg analogy. An iceberg where 90% of this epidemic is how big the iceberg is.
Oliver, you'll have more details, but a lot of Singapore and China, it's been done as well, and the Special Administrative Region certainty. And maybe Oliver has something to add.
Thanks very much. I think clearly we've seen quite a lot of severe cases reported from China, which is a little bit different from the picture we're seeing outside of China. In the sense that we're picking up quite a lot more mild cases, and that's in part because the surveillance and the search for cases is quite intensive when there are only a small number of cases in certain countries. So
to take a few questions from journalists online, and if we are ready, I will start with Kai Kupferschmidt from Science. Kai, can you hear us?
Yes, thanks for letting me ask. Mike, I'm curious. You talked about information that could scare people, and I'm just curious if you could comment on, the name of the virus, SARS-CoV-2, whether you feel that that's something that strikes the wrong note, and whether you will be using it.
Yeah, the naming process for the virus is not done by WHO. The virus is named according to its phylogenetic links with other viruses, and it's a technical name that I suppose people in labs are very comfortable with, because they can associate one virus with another virus with another. It's a cataloguing and system of relating viruses to one another. It's not about relating the virus to the world. We're trying to relate the virus to the world, the experience that people have with the virus, coronavirus disease, and I think that's clear.
But I was wondering the big increase in the number of deaths. How do you explain that? Because I'm assuming they're not deaths going back to the beginning of the outbreak. I presume they are new deaths. So can you explain that in any way? Thank you.
We're not 100% sure about those deaths. We believe that some of those deaths are actually deaths that refer to the clinically confirmed cases. And again, remember here, if we look at the population attack rates in places like Hubei in China, we're talking about 4 to 5 per 100,000 people or less being infected with this virus in Hubei. Even in this intense, there are many other causes of lower respiratory infection, of pneumonia, and other things. So mixed amongst this may be other causes of pneumonia. Remember, these are clinicians confirming the case in the absence of a laboratory diagnosis in someone who has clinical symptoms and changes in the X-ray consistent with pneumonia. These are effectively pneumonia cases, and there may have been deaths amongst them. Again, those deaths may be distributed across many days and weeks, and we will come back to you, Base, because we just didn't get the disaggregated number for the deaths amongst the lab confirmed cases today, so we will come back to you on that.
Thank you very much. Let's take one more question from journalists online. We have Michael from CNN. Michael, can you hear us?
Can you hear us? Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you for taking my question. Dr. Ryan, Director General Tedros mentioned his concern about weaker health systems in different countries. I think he mentioned the number about 30 to 5 countries that you're concerned about. I happen to be in Ukraine at the moment, and it so happens that vaccination is quite low, as well as preparedness. I'm wondering, in that number of 35 to 45 countries, are you also concerned about some of the middle income or emerging economies? I don't mean to put you on the spot and mention Ukraine, but normally when we talk about weaker health systems, we're thinking of the countries. So if you could comment on that, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, we've based our selection of countries on a matrix between the risk of the disease arriving against the vulnerabilities identified by the country itself as part of its own SPAR analysis, but also joint external evaluations and many other parameters that have measured specific weaknesses or vulnerabilities in the public health and healthcare system. We've also shared those analyses with the countries themselves, with our regional offices, up with the number. So it's a number that compares risk with vulnerability, and then further information directly from those countries. In fact, we've been working very closely with Ukraine on the massive measles outbreak in Ukraine over the last year, and we've provided lots and lots of technical assistance and have a very strong country office there working with Ukrainian authorities, and we would expect to provide them. WHO provides policy advice and technical assistance to all countries. This is supporting countries, and we'll support some and not the others. Our job is to support all countries. What we're trying to identify here are specific countries that have gaps in their laboratory capacity to isolate patients, their supplies of PPE, their ability to manage the first 100 and the first 1,000 cases. And we've actually looked at the costs and the investment needed for the first case, the first 100 cases, the first 1,000 cases. And we've modelled those costs for the countries and then see what is it going to actually cost for this particular load of cases in this country, in this context. And in doing that, we'll be rolling out national planning based on the global strategic plan, and each country will build an action plan, and those costs will roll up again, and those costs may exceed the estimates we made of over $600 million. But what we needed to do was get out to the world and show the risk, show the vulnerability, model the costs that would be associated with the first case, first 100, first 1,000, and then go down to the ground, working with UN partners and others, working with the country, and bring those real costs back up into the system. And when we're doing that, we may find that some of the capacities we thought didn't exist do exist, and we may find that some of the capacities that we thought did exist, adjust the plans accordingly. But this allows us to move in a very systematic fashion. And there are many countries in Central Asia, in South Asia, the Western Pacific and the small island nations are very exposed in a situation like this. We saw the impact that measles had on the health system in the Western Pacific. We saw the spectre of children, infants, ventilated. Every single ventilator in Western Samoa was occupied by a child suffering from measles. At Christmas, our teams were there. The emergency medical teams were there. In fact, our last big outbreak response was in the Western Pacific, taking care of people at the other end. And now we have the tragedy of people in the older age spectrum on those ventilators. So we have to get systems ready. And we have to prepare countries for the arrival of this disease. That is the only prudent course of action. And we will continue to raise this issue. As I said, with the European Union today, we advocated very strongly, and we were very, very pleased with the response we got in terms of the solidarity that countries in the European Union want to show amongst each other and want to show to countries who need investment now to prepare.
Thank you very much. We have time for one or two questions. John first, and then our colleague here. John.
Thank you. Yesterday we heard that the U.S. delegation is still where they're going to be admitted to China. Has WHO to China about this? Is that part of the role? And are there any? Will any of the public health officials from the U.S. be admitted to China in relation to coronavirus? Thank you.
Sorry, there is a multinational team from all over the world who will go to the field, and that has been agreed. They should begin deploying over the weekend. I won't go into the details of their nationalities or their names because they have preparations to make and visas to be issued, and they need to be briefed and they need to get to the field. But as soon as we have confirmation, because once an offer is made, then there's an acceptance, then the sending country has to finally accept to send and dispatch the person. So I'm not going to preempt any final decisions on behalf of the sending countries by naming names of individuals, but I can assure you the team is top-class scientists from all over the world and all of the relevant countries who can contribute to an endeavour such as this.
Thank you. Yes, please.
I'm Nikkei from Japanese media. As you pointed out, there have been one death confirmed in Japan today, and I think the situation seems to be getting more serious and crucial as time is going on, including cruise ship Diamond Princess. Could you comment on this? And I'm wondering how you're working with Japanese authorities on this issue. Thank you.
Yes, I think at this stage almost ship-related issues have been resolved successfully. The other ship has docked in the Westerdam in Cambodia, and cruise doctors and others on the ship. There's some people with very mild upper respiratory symptoms. They're currently been tested, and while those tests are being completed, all of the people remain on board. But that's been a purely precautionary measure at the moment, and we thank the government of Cambodia for hosting the Westerdam, and our colleagues at the IMO. We went through a very detailed process yesterday of looking at all cruise ships and ensuring that every ship had a harbour to dock in, and we're ensuring that that has happened. The situation in Japan is a more active situation because we clearly have a large number of cases in a very closed environment on that ship. The Japanese authorities have been ensuring that any suspect cases that are tested positive are taken immediately for adequate care within the Japanese system, and we thank Japan for that. There are also negotiations underway to allow patients to leave the ship, and that's currently been negotiated and discussed. And it's a difficult thing for anybody to live in it, difficult for an elderly person to do so. So again, I won't go into the details, but we are working with Japan to try and get the most needy passengers on. We will have to work with Japan in the coming days to see if better and more appropriate arrangements can be support to the other people on that ship, and I'm sure we can come to a proper arrangement in order to take care of the welfare of people on the ship.
Thank you very much. Dr. Ryan is awaited on a call right now, so we'll conclude on watching us online, dialing in, or watching us at WHO Twitter account sent in coming minutes, and we will have a transcript for next media briefing. We will inform you tomorrow morning. Thanks everyone, and have a nice day.
今朝聽到媽子説話，佢輕嘆數十句，全城在團，我老母急出眼淚，隨時就嚟死，看政府封關咁多股，連忘記起我哋沒任何糧食，快到百佳去，我進入店鋪卻已不及時，大眾掃貨逼爆，仲有師奶和同胞 M 巾掃埋病態般極怪異，全像喪屍狂入廁紙，我發現全港多麼低智，撲出去狂入科，彷彿全人類失咗理智。終於將餅乾也扣入蛋袋裏，滿是餅碎，狂入礦泉水，撲罐頭跟蔬菜果類，然後去排隊，有阿叔竟咳嗽，神速後退。如若要安到每日完全無事，要豬嘴，我進入店鋪卻已不及時，大貨逼爆着超市，仲有師奶和同胞 M 巾掃埋病態般極其怪異，全像喪屍狂入廁紙，我發現全港多麼低智。 撲出去狂入伙，彷彿全人類失咗理智。為何林鄭咁多次測試，全民中招先滿意？無恥兼幼稚，頹廢又無知。猜測我會否幸存？抹去武漢都染病點算？萬個撲街從湖北衝關過嚟，像喪屍頓時變異，全部中招，全部發燒，至發現如今多麼可笑。香港這大城市，警察沒辭職，去愛共愛國說冇乜事宜，病案爆發驚冇命都似，大國專欺詐瞞騙，專貪秋錢又禁聲扮傻冇事，防疫設施全部吔屎，世衛又唔敢講佢太少，天我在微笑。總相信明日知爆到了，才可保我名字。
春雨中最想綿綿，嚴鬆下配上綿綿，秋意風也想綿綿，看雪夜更想綿。一搭車我即綿綿，如午飯我都綿綿，等放工要唞綿綿，人燥後更想綿，一瞓醒5點。晒氣氛冇晒戰鬥發酵，8個
唔好害人哋啲仔女啦。好心啊，啲行徑有乜真的衫打黑色衫，我哋嘅後生仔。好心啊，啲行徑天生咁樣，日日爭取打交，又破壞香港。打全外，打全外，打議員，打議員，打女仔，打死黑警，打爛呢個家園啊！死黑警又唔做嘢，又唔讀書，死黑警點解我哋唔讀書？愛啲仔女我唔該。全家仔女啦，死黑警，我冇罪㗎，點解搞我咧？黑警就係我哋仇人，黑警日日鬧事，黑警破壞香港法例，黑警破壞香港法例，黑警就係我哋仇人，黑警日日鬧。黑警破壞香港法例，黑警破壞香港法例，香港法例。